Welcome to Spiritually Fierce, the podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rikki Jane Adams, principal and founder of the Institute for Intuitive Intelligence and creator of the Spiritually Fierce movement. Spiritually Fierce is not just a phrase. It is a movement of awakening consciousness of which we are all a part, if we want to be. In each episode, we'll explore what it means to be spiritually fierce, how to become it, and why it is the revolution in consciousness that will save the world. Join me and my fierce guests for deep conversations on spirituality beyond the trinkets and superstitions of the new age that will support you to increase your power to serve. Welcome everybody to Spiritually Fierce, the podcast. And today I am joined by the glorious Krista. Krista, I'm going to ask you to pronounce your surname for me because I would say Haapala, but I want to make sure that's right.
So it's Haapala, actually. So
okay,
the way you're pronouncing it is more kind of the Hawaiian way, and it's actually Finnish. So
yeah, so I'm making it Hawaiian and you're Finnish, which makes more sense. Okay, I love it. Thank you for clarifying that for me. And it's only been like a year that I've been like, I should ask her one day.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. And it is one of those things that's my partner's name. So my other surname is Hammerbacher. So that's why I just say Krista.
Yeah, I am the Krista. Thank you everybody for coming. Yes. Yeah. Now, Krista, I'm going to read your bio because you are a highly accomplished woman. Through your writing, art, and consciousness design, you guide humans in creating passionate and pleasure-led lives and loves. Whether speaking, leading circles, or in sessions, you embody your service to the collective as the Bliss Mystic. You're an author, a sexologist, an artist, and a poet, and the creator of collage art and author of the books, including Unlearn Moderation, Body 2.0, and Ischemia. Mm-hmm. You find your own edge through hiking, dancing, crosswords, love that. Weightlifting, which I've seen on the Instagrams and I'm always so impressed. And wandering in your land boat, your RV. I love that you once upon a time had a yacht also. We won't make this episode about sailing, but we have that shared love. Yep. Your goal is, or to practice, your practice is global. And your home is oceanside, a few steps from the magical Maine woods. And we're going to be focusing on your book, Body 2.0 today. So welcome, my darling sister. You are a student of the Institute for Intuitive Intelligence also. And so I've had a great opportunity to get to know you through that vehicle. But I'm very happy to be sitting here with you in this role as an accomplished author and all of these incredible, wonderful things that you are. So let's just jump straight into this then. So tell us about Body 2.0.
Sure. Well, obviously so excited to be here and so excited to talk about writing books and books. It is a passion I've been writing forever that I know of. And Body 2.0 was a book is a book. I wrote it though. It feels it's like it's in experiential rear view because it's a leadership voice memoir about my experience with double mastectomy and deep flap reconstruction. And the reason I chose to do that was because I lost my mom to breast cancer, and all of my maternal lineage has had breast cancer and passed because of it. So I chose to be the cycle breaker and had a preventative double mastectomy. So that term that some are familiar with is I'm a previvor because I had a genetic predisposition. So the book itself is vignettes in real time of my experience of the aftermath of losing mom, and then making the decision straight away to have the surgery. And it chronicles the surgery and recovery and being a mother and being a partner through that whole process. And ultimately it was my way of keeping tabs on my own center and my own inspiration through that very challenging time.
Yeah. So why did you want to then put that out into the world? Because obviously that writing process for the self is deeply healing. I know from that, journaling through crisis moments and trauma as you're describing. But what was that motivation to say, okay, now I want to share this with a global audience?
Yeah, it is such a fantastic question, because I feel like in the moment there was a different reason for sharing than now in reflection. And so I'll start with what I was really feeling and embodied with then, was really honoring my mother. Honoring my mother, if she had had that choice, I don't want to speculate, but her path is her path, but that was not a choice that she even conceived of. And she had multiple bouts of cancer, and then actually did have a double mastectomy before then. She then died of her breast cancer. And in that experience, there was a part of not telling her story necessarily, but telling my experience of her story. There was a hesitance to take that step into changing her body because of a woman living in the patriarchy and seen in the male gaze as losing my breasts. What does that mean for me as a woman and my identity? And again, that's my reflection of her experience, not hers. So I won't tell her story. However, for me at that time, that was of fundamental importance, that was deeply impactful to me, to break that cycle for anyone who is choosing to not have what I believe is a life-saving surgery because of these influences. And so that was what it was then. Now I will say, I always do the high five myself, like right on, that I captured all of that for myself, because there is something to notice in that sharing in the moment and then seeing oneself from a different vantage. And I am so grateful now to have shared it for the now me to read and see the growth. But also, actually, RJ, what I love about this was it's created this web of humans that I'm connected to because of the book. And so the book was originally published in 2016 and has just, I just had the 5-year anniversary, and I have this web of humans from across the globe, including women themselves, who don't know if this is a choice they want to make. They're concerned, they're all the things. And, kind of some hand holding through their process, but also supporting their partners, people who are like, oh, your book helped me understand what my partner might be going through. And so that was not something I could have foreseen when I was writing. And I think that is such a profound noticing of the writing process, is when we're capturing in the moment, we have no idea the impact that it's going to have over time.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that, I'm curious as to whether you see, for example, with Spiritually Fierce, I ended up publishing a second edition because I did see that there was, in my case, very different knowledge that was missing in review later on. Would you see that as this book would go on to have future editions that might include more of the impact of sharing, or is that like another book?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a great question. I love these. I get so excited. It is another book, and it's more other books. Like it's really created its own understanding of, again, the impact that our words can have when they live in this book. It's not a passing thought. It's not hidden away in my journal. It is out there for consumption, for whatever that means for whomever is receiving it. And so for me, I feel as though, again, coming back to the sacredness of that rite of passage for me in all of the ways, as a daughter, as a mother, as a woman, as a human being, as someone that was very aware of my ancestry and the suffering of the women in my lineage, because of this particular genetic predisposition, whatever that means. And I could go deeper into that. But in this case, I feel like there are components when I flip back through, I love that idea. And this comes from you, is that this is our own medicine. So I have no concern about flipping back through my own book and going, I need to read this chapter about being Wonder Woman because I need this now. And I wrote it in, 2014 or 15 or whatever it is. And so I feel as though there's a lot of inspiration that now me has a different vantage. So I want to give now me that voice. So I'm working on a couple of things, but I see it as extra books. Next.
I love that. And I really want to know, my darling, with a woman like you who is on fire with creativity, like there's so much creative energy in you. How do you choose what comes next? Like you clearly could write 20 different books on 20 different subjects. How do you follow to where you're going to go next?
That is so much, it's so individual, and it's so, this is the tricky part for me, is it can be fleeting. Just the way I roll is, you get that bite, you get that, I call them seeds, writing seeds. You get that seed and you say, this has to be spoken. This has to be written. This has to exist in the world. And then you notice, does this stand my own test of time? Does this have a gravity to it? And is it getting deeper in my experience? Am I calling back to these same questions over and over again? And so for me, when it comes to writing, there's these options. Is it a social post? Because there are some of us who demonize social, there's this, it doesn't have a place in my life. It's like, let's bring a higher consciousness to that medium. That is part of our consciousness. Yeah. So maybe it's a 200-word missive, there it lives. Or is it a blog post? Or can we share this in a newsletter or just with our friend group, write it down and share it? Or does it rise to the level then of maybe an essay or a book, which does take discipline? And so for me, it has to have enough gravity in my life experience to commit to the book writing process, because it is an isolated process. Yeah. It can be very lonely. And so, I really feel like there's a discernment of what really has that gravity. And for me, I think ultimately what it comes down to is, does it light you on fire? Are you on fire with it? Because if you are, you will stand the test of that discipline. If not, then, you might get to, 20,000 words in and then it's like, wow, that's a lot of commitment to not land fully, not useless, but still something to notice that you have to make a commitment to yourself, that vow, like, I'm going to see this through.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. And it's something that I touched on in the first episode, because it's really about that self-evaluation of, is this worthy? Is this worthy not just of my time, but of taking up space in the world? Like, and the only way you can know that is, you can do your research, you can look what's out there, but we can't really make a rational decision about that. It has to come from, do I have this deep love affair with this content? And so for me, it's looking at, what do I keep saying again and again and again? And if I keep saying it, then it's probably worthy of me putting it into a longer format with some deeper ideas around it.
Yeah. Yeah. That concept of, is it worthy? I feel as though, again, the self is the best filter. Is this the medicine that I need? And then there's another piece of that for me that speaks, which is legacy, which is the fact that we're still reading ancient texts. Yeah. We're still reading, Shakespeare. We're still reading, the Sapphic poetry from, we're still reading these ancient texts. And so it is a rite of passage in and of itself to say, I'm going to join those ranks. I'm going to put my words down. And that, to me, there's a lot of ritual around that, around really owning and standing in that power of not having anything external or optics or listicles or awards or anything be the filter through which I am considering these ideas. And I'm always thinking about the person on the other side of that book, and for who knows how long.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And I do think, there's something so powerful in what you're sharing, because there is an interplay between being strategic, especially if you are writing as part of your service, that, thinking about, for example, I have realized superconscious intuition is 2 books, not 1 book. And I tried really hard to be really financially rational and make it all 1 book, because it's cheaper to publish 1 book than 2 books. And I just had to surrender ultimately to, the truth that these are 2 different texts. And then to look at that discipline even of, okay, so that means strategically don't release them both at the same time. Like, I got to think about my audience and how much all of these things seem sometimes at odds with that, just that deep creative yearning, which is so primal for me, and also so holy, that, which are both the same, of course, that this has to be birthed now. Like, if I try to keep this baby in, I'm going to really hurt myself. And finding the interplay of those 2 forces, and I think they coexist. I think it's like the Shiva and the Shakti, and there's no reason for us to deny planning and strategy and clear thinking and knowing when's right to share something, whilst also honoring that kind of primal birthing that happens when we're in the flow. Tell me a little bit about your experience of that effort and ease, or that strategy, and then the creative Shiva Shakti, whatever language you'd put on it.
Yeah, it is Shiva Shakti. It absolutely is. And I feel, for me, I find myself always, I'm a huge fan of Stephen King. He lives up the highway from me here in Maine. And, this phrase of kill your darlings, meaning
Yes, my favorite.
This can be something so, like, in your heart. It can be, as I often say, you're unzipping yourself and heart and guts on the table. Like, that's what you're doing when you're writing a book. And so there's something I find really exhilarating and really turns me on about that process. And then I start to think about that, like, more linear, logical strategizing. And what I offer is just in Shiva Shakti, it is that balance of they feed into one another. And so what you may find is, you get on a roll and, you haven't showered in 4 days, you're, drinking whatever coffee's at the bottom of the mug that you can reach with an arm, and you're just going. And then you read it maybe, a week later, or you bring in that discernment, you bring in that refinement energy, and, that more, I'm feeling that goddess energy, archetype energy that comes with it, where it's just like you splatter it on the page, and then you reread it and you say, this is all worthy, except there is a refinement. There is this idea that something that may strike me in that place that needs to be struck is unique to me, or needs refinement, or won't be understood in the language I'm using, because that is important. So there is that walking that line of, am I over curating? Am I making it palatable? What are the judges that I'm, what's the judge panel that I'm facing? So it's me. It's all got to be filtered through me, but there are those different vantages of, this does need to be an enjoyable read, or a difficult read, or, a little bit of both. This does need to really hold people's attention. Those are real considerations, because if it is a worthy idea, if they are worthy messages to be shared, then you want you want to use your own discernment and, that holy discernment to make it so that it is able to be received in such a way that it can be, used or celebrated or written on a sticky note and stuck on the bathroom mirror. You want that impact. And so sometimes it takes culling out of your darlings.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, one of the greatest joys after publishing Spiritually Fierce was, seeing people quote me. I'm like, oh my God, I've made it. I like, so much in what you shared I want to touch on, and you're really getting to the something we discussed before we went live, of the art versus craft of writing, and that high quality output versus, in the age of self-publishing, when anyone can put anything into the world, what will stand the test of time and what will create legacy. And inevitably, it doesn't matter how good your ideas are, if the quality in the communication of those ideas is not there, then you create an impediment to your audience being able to receive it. And that's part of the role and duty that I feel, is to make it as good as it can be. Not perfect. I don't think there's a perfect text. And, I've certainly published books with plenty of spelling mistakes and errors like that. But have I really used that discernment to consider if this is, again, worthy, if there's the quality in it, and not just publishing for publishing's sake, which we know, we talked about the shadow side of this industry. I think with the ease and access to self-publishing or publishing, with multi-author books or things, that it can be all about just getting that stamp beside your name. I'm a published author, I'm a best-selling author. And I think for me, I can see that we sometimes there lose the craft, discernment.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always a part of me that's like, let's make everyone a published author. And then how do you rise above there? And it's not about ego. This is about connection. It's part of Unlearn Moderation is, we're being, told that interaction is connection, and it's just not the same. And that's how I feel about a book that is rushed through. It's slapped together because you need X, Y, and Z. You get out what you put in, as within, so without, as above, so below. I mean, it is of the laws. And so when you're in that space of doing something, creating something, and not honoring the sacredness of what you're choosing to share. And this even includes, poetry. It includes these other aspects, fiction, but especially in the case of, if you are showing up as a teacher, own that, stand in that, be that, or a priestess, that, thinking of those energies, that this isn't about you. And that for me feels as though, I always have the feeling of, let people have their, stamps and their author and their, by all means, yet at the same time, I want to speak to those who are ready to receive with a fully open heart and are ready to receive the deep connection. So when I'm writing, there's an energetic component, energy first there. And even before I had the clear language for that, it was a sacred noticing to sit, even in the difficulty, even in the pain, even in the staring at the blank page, sacred, showing up as the energy I want conveyed through the page. It is connection. And if we're writing in a way that is just interaction, okay, sure, that's got some value, but connection is what I'm seeking. And I invite anyone, who's seeking to write, to recognize that when you are in that energetic state of connection, it is irresistible. The words flow. There it is. That's it. Even when they're not flowing, they're flowing. We have to, it's the balance of the stillness and the doing. Yet at the same time, if you're just trying to find something that's going to, sell books, or is going to be, whatever it is, commodified, that is so much different than the energy of sitting at your keyboard with the energy of connection.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm really grateful for that, that idea of interaction versus connection, because I think you've really articulated something that I felt but didn't know how to describe. And I think it is it really comes down to that idea of depth. And all of my work and the work of the Institute is about the deep faith. And it's easy to have a performative spirituality. It's easy to be a performative writer in that sense as well. And that's certainly not something that appeals to me, and certainly obviously not to you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions in our final few minutes about you. I want to get to know you a little bit more. So first of all, is there another book coming? Does it have a title and a date? Where are you at with that?
That I love the accountability there. So there is another. So Ischemia was published about a year ago, give or take a few days, interestingly. So I love the
yeah.
And Ischemia was a poetry collection. So that landed, that did its thing. It is the birthing process. And it's also there's a birthing process in the creation of it is birthed, and then we have all of this other stuff to do. So it's kind of a convoluted experience from a creative place. And that's where kind of, we talked about that linear piece of the puzzle comes in after the fact, which I have to work on my patience and my vigilance and my steadfastness through that part of the process. And I am right now in the process of writing. The working title right now is called Edge Meditations. So one of my fundamental tenets of the work that I do with all of my clients in my circles is this idea of pushing your edge, find your edge. And there is where we live. And the cliche, or that Hallmark card version is there. But when we really do live there, there is an alchemy of the edge. There is this space that we can exist within, and it requires us to constantly be in movement, constantly in movement and stillness, but constantly in questioning why, what is going on, that concept of radical discontinuity, and that I never get myself in a rut if it's a mindless rut. And so that's what Edge Meditations is about.
Yeah.
It's about getting out of that rut and staying out of that rut and making mindful choices, really owning our power.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So exciting. And what are you reading right now?
Ooh, I love that. So I'm reading right now a book that I really, really have found to be a breath of fresh air. And I'm going to miss the name of the author, but it's a book called Your Life as Art. And it was published in 2000. So it's some time ago. And it really is such a joyful exploration of applying artistic concepts, like structural tension and things, to how you are living. So it's novel, it's fun, and it's really practical. And it's a way of, for me, taking what feel like two connected but disparate worlds and putting them into a life focus. So I'm really enjoying that book, and I'm really disappointed that I can't get the author right this moment.
That's all right. We'll put it in the show notes, and we can add a link to that so people can find it if they're keen to learn more. So what do people tend to misunderstand about you?
That is something that I'm still working on, really identifying how to communicate in my work. So this idea of the Bliss Mystic, and also being a trained sexologist. So a part of my practice is focused on empowered sexuality. And because we live in a culture that does not integrate sexuality into our wholeness, it is disintegrated. It is separate. It's that little black dress that you put in the back of the closet that you pull out every few months or so, or maybe, but you only wear it to special occasions. And so when we integrate sex, sexuality, and erotic energy, which is our life force, into our day-to-day, then it's just there. It is. We understand what it feels like when it's integrated, but disintegration is our norm, is what many of us were raised with. And so it almost becomes backwards, where the integration is the weird, the stretch. It's what we grow to. And in fact, that's that's the effects of the patriarchy, is that especially women's sexuality has to be separate in order to keep it contained because it's so powerful. So for me, I think what is misunderstood is whenever we talk about sex, we're only talking about sex. And when I'm talking about sex, sexuality, erotic energy, I'm just talking about your day-to-day living. It exists in you constantly. And when we call upon our bliss and we live in our wholeness, then it's not special. It's not shameful. It's not anything. It just is. And so, it's a tricky thing to integrate it in a world that doesn't yet want to own that and integrate that. But there are plenty of women, especially out there, that are thrilled to be in that space and really live in that space. And so, the audience is there for that, but it's not everyone's message.
Yeah, but I love that. And you are a paradigm buster and a change agent. And that's such a revolution in consciousness. As you say, the separation of women from their sexuality, first of all, because of patriarchy, but then the separation of sexuality and spirituality.
Yeah.
These are such important wounds that need to be healed. And I just honor you for doing that. So, my darling, last question. If today was your last day on earth, what do you want us to know?
Bliss is the path. Pleasure is the path. Bliss, pleasure, ecstasy are not accidental. They are the path. They illuminate you to your truth. Yeah. That's the gift. And we live in cultures that tell us otherwise, to keep us small and to keep us disconnected from our power. And when we start to travel that path, that feedback loop is irresistible. There's no way, once you know that bliss and pleasure and ecstasy are your path, that they illuminate the next steps with ease and flow, then there's no turning back. And there's a big mountain for many of us to summit to see that vista. And yet it's still available to all of us if we choose to take that path.
Yeah. Jema. Thank you,
Yeah.
beloved sister Krista. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I know that everyone listening will gain so much from it. And, I think we should do this again soon.
I would love that. It was my true pleasure.
Absolutely.